Dimension W Episode 3, Chase the Numbers. This one was a pretty cool episode because we actually got to see Mira kind of have her own side story with these little kids, and her actually being able to talk to just kind of some normal people in the world, even though they're really young kids who can't talk to her about like the big things in life, which, considering how long she's existed as a robot, I think she could use like a human, an adult human to talk to about just what it means to be human instead of just, little kids to play with. But she has someone, at least outside of Kyoma, who apparently just kicks her in the butt at the end of this episode, which I thought was kind of funny. But it was cool when she saved those kids. It scared the crap out of me when that thing broke because I was wearing headphones when I was watching it. And so it was just like her talking to the little girl, and it's kind of silent. And I figured something was going to happen. I didn't think it would just be like boom and like this loud, like just breaking noise. But that was a cool scene. I like seeing her, she takes off in front of this little girl and she goes and saves those boys. And one of the cars just like crushes and just lops her head clean off, which just freaked the kids out, which makes perfect sense. But I thought that was actually pretty cool. It's a nice scene. I would have loved to have seen it where we got to see her like using her robotic strength, like just holding up a car over the kids, because that just would have been a pretty cool shot. But I like the way they did it because we find out that she's in the shack. Once Kyoma gets home, and of course he finally gets out of the police station, and he sees her, and she doesn't have a head, and her head's in her lap because it got lopped off by one of the cars. So I thought that was actually an interesting little way to show that off, but it was certainly really cool. And then Kyoma had some really good stuff in this episode. For one, they already gave us the answer to what the numbers are, and we find out that they're basically super coils, which take a ton more power from Dimension W than current coils do. Current coils have like a very huge limit compared to these numbers, which have just insanely dramatic reserves of power that they can snatch from Dimension W. So with them being so many, because I was wondering how many there were, because the one that we saw was just 7, but when the guys explaining them, they show one that's like 182, and I think there was one that was even more than that. So there are a ton of them out there that have this insane well of power that they can tap from. And I think that's very cool, very dangerous. And then they give us a nice little answer as to how the numbered coils are the main reason for the sort of cover-up events that happen. Then we get a little glimpse of some random spikes and stuff. And I'm like, that's definitely the war that, Kyoma was in, where it's like, oh, those people were gone. So that's definitely what happened. Whatever he fought in, he's involved with something that had to do with a numbered coil, and it was, obviously like a million times worse than that little thing we got in the last episode, and that was a regular coil. So, that happens with like just a little bit of power from an alternate dimension. So you can imagine what would happen with a limitless thing, and whatever they show with all those spikes was like it created a mountain almost. That's how it looked. So I thought that was very cool, and they gave us an answer. Like it's still not much because we don't know the specifics of that crazy battle, but I thought that was cool. It's like they gave us the answer to the numbers. He casually mentions like, oh, it's this, which Kyoma remembers like, oh, the crazy things that I've seen before. So that's what happened during his battle. And we also had a glimpse, and they did this before and I didn't mention, I think it was in the first episode, but they showed the camera again, and they showed that in the first episode is like in passing. They showed someone's face, but in this episode they showed it where when he was having the dream again of the battles and stuff, he wakes up but he looks at that camera again. So that's connected to someone, of course, or maybe him in the past. It's definitely possible, but considering they call him a beast and stuff and how he's fighting in war, I don't think he was the one taking pictures. So I'm assuming it's connected. I would think it's connected to someone else. So we get to see this camera, and we have him kind of going through visions again of what he dealt with in battle. There's like a random guy that was like yelling at him. He was like kind of in like armor and stuff, and he's just like yelling at him. Then there are some skips here and there, and then he wakes up. So I thought that was cool. doing a really great job of teasing certain things, and they bring up the question again. They really bring it up in this one, I think. Um, why Kyoma hates coils, and so Mira asks it, and then it's like, of course she's not going to get an answer from him, and she tries to get it somewhere else, and that doesn't exactly work. And then we have the older guy that Kyoma goes to when he tries to get a new phone. He's like, oh, you still hate coils. So they're kind of driving it home like, this guy doesn't like coils. They talk about his car quite a bit in this episode. And also we get to see that he does have another car. There's like one scene he was on the phone, and because I realized in the first episode I was talking about some stuff where he had a second car, and I was like, I know I saw it before, and I thought it was in the first episode. It may have been, because I don't know if that was the same car that he normally drives, but it could have been the car that he's driving. But he definitely has a second one, so I don't know if it was that car that he was working on um, in the very first episode, or if this is the first time we're seeing it. But he has a second car like on the rack next to him when he's, I think he's on the phone or he's doing something. But it had like a little cover over, and I was like, oh, there's that other car. So he has a second car in there that he's working on for sure. But I really enjoyed this one. I like what we got to learn about the world. He finds out, Kyoma finds out why he was actually released, and so he goes to the new COO of New Tesla, and we find out that this woman is actually working. Well, I guess that's no real surprise, but Albert actually shows up in this episode and specifically reports to her, and she's actually the grandmother of the little girl, and she mentions like, oh, I wanted to see the other beast of Grendel. And when they say it like that, it makes it seem like no one else has survived, because I think she may have said, I wanted to see the second Grendel, and then Albert showed up and he was like, what'd you think of seeing the other one? So considering they work together, I believe they're the only two, so maybe I'm guessing they're the only ones that actually survived the crazy cataclysmic war of the coils. So that was kind of cool. The way they kind of threw that in there. It's like everyone knows, or I guess everyone high up knows, because she knew who he was. So Albert has to be the one, because there was something he said specifically that kind of made it obvious that he was the other person. So he kind of gave her that information, like, oh yeah, my buddy, who's the other person, which definitely means there's only two. And I thought that the loser in the last episode could have been a part of the war, but then he kind of talked about exactly who he was and how he was involved in something else crazy. So I was thinking like, oh, maybe there's someone else that survived that battle. But we find out that Albert and Kyoma are the two survivors, or at least they're the two beasts. So they might not be the only survivors, but typically when when you get those names, it's for a good reason. When you get like a nickname from war, generally it's because you're the only ones that made it, and so it's like, oh, you're like crazy awesome and stuff, and it's kind of like, because it's war, sometimes it can be because you're super awesome, but a lot of times it's like you're just fortunate. So I don't know, it's one or the other. It could be both. I mean, we saw Kyoma fight. We haven't seen Albert, but Kyoma is basically like superhuman just because for this anime. So maybe he was called that for a good reason, and who knows, maybe Albert's the same way, actually, now that I think about it. But I thought that was kind of cool, just little bits of backstory and these glimpses and flashes and these questions, like, why is Kyoma this way? And, no real answers. So, looking forward to what we're going to be getting. It was really great to get the answer of the numbers. It was just like, here's the introduction to the numbers, here's the answer to the numbers, here's how this is probably the answer to the craziness that Kyoma and Albert dealt with during their big battle. So I thought that was actually pretty cool too, because it was like, alright, here's like two answers in one, even though of course with the whole big battle still a ton of specifics to be found out. So we'll probably, I'm assuming, obviously have to wait for that. But I certainly enjoyed this one. Kind of curious to see how Mira continues to develop as a character throughout this, because she mentions in this one like, oh, basically I've only been with father. So I want to see how she kind of evolves through some of the crazy situations they're definitely going to be involved in. If the last episode is any indication, they're going to be involved in some crazy stuff. And this one as well, actually. She had to save three young boys and got her head like sent through the sky. So I want to see how she develops because I'm actually very curious. But I certainly enjoyed this one. Actually, I wanted to bring this up because it kind of confused me with the whole tail thing. I would think people know that she's a robot because she has the tail, but and this is something I mentioned before. I was like, I don't know if it's illegal for people to have their own personal robots. Like they haven't given that sort of rule, but that seems to be how it is. Because it's like with her having the crazy tail and everything, people would assume she's a robot in general. Because I haven't seen any other humans walking around with tails or the ears or anything like that. And of course, she could play the ears off, and that's why she wears the little scarf. But the tail, she's just running around with the tail out all the time. So I'm like, how is that not automatically bringing attention if people can't have their own robots? But I don't know if that's the case because they don't really talk about that. So every time I see it, I'm like, I don't see how they're hiding anything when she's got a wired tail, swaying around all the time. But it doesn't really detract from the episode. It's just a question I really have because every time I see, I'm like, how are they hiding? She has a robot tail that's just sticking out all the time. And they made a note of it in the last episode where she was like, oh, I can't hide my tail. And I was like, oh, because robots have tails, but she just goes around like it's nothing, with the tail out. And I know she was at the gas station, which was definitely a mobile gas station. I think that was supposed to be the reference, even though they took out the B. Which I thought that was actually kind of funny, but that's just an anime thing. I always love seeing that when they change like one letter in the anime, and it's like, oh, Pepsi without the second P, and it's like, oh, that's definitely not Pepsi. So I always think that's really funny. So I'm pretty sure it was supposed to be mobile gas station, but I enjoyed this episode. I thought it was really good. Definitely want to know what you guys thought about it. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts, and I want to know how you guys feel about Mira's development in this episode. I know it's only it's very early to ask that, but she had a bit of a change in this one, and I want to know what you guys want to see from her development as a character, because she's in a really interesting position where she can't exactly just go out and learn about the world, especially with the robot ears. Very hard to hide that, and I would assume the whole coil in the heart thing is pretty dead giveaway. So I want to know what you guys want to see from her development and what you guys thought about this kind of first kick of development for her character as well. And some of the other stuff we learned, of course, the numbers and how they were definitely involved in whatever crazy battle Kyoma and Albert were in before. So definitely want to know your thoughts and expectations and things like that. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.